I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا.
Thank you, Madam President. This month, multiple countries hostile to Syria have hurried to issue statements commemorating what they called the 11th anniversary of the Syrian Revolution. In reality, though, it is the 11th anniversary of the aggression by the United States, Britain, and France and their allies against Syria through their terrorist proxies, secessionist groups, economic sanctions, coupled with an immense propaganda campaign that spread lies, disinformation, and fabrications. Ladies and gentlemen, the Syria against which this war was waged is the epitome of history and civilization, coexistence and tolerance, resistance and heroism, progress and development. It has been targeted by the forces of evil, hatred, obscurantist, destructive forces, forces of ignorance and underdevelopment, treason and disloyalty, to obstruct the Syrian Renaissance, to destroy the development gains, to shed the blood of its people that have defended its dignity, sovereignty, and unity, and to undermine its regional and international role. Yes, the Syrian people did start a revolution, but not 11 years ago. 100 years ago, when it revolted against the Ottoman occupier, then against the French occupier, until it gained its full independence with its bravery and heroism. It then launched a revolution against injustice and obscurantist ideas, ushering in a phase of comprehensive transformation leading to decades of stability and laying the foundation for development and modernization. Madam President, expressing concern is a phrase often used by these countries in their statements. What we really should be concerned about are the practices of American occupation forces, their support to secessionist militias in the northeast of Syria, their collaboration to violate Syrian sovereignty and to steal national resources. We should be concerned over the practices of Turkish occupation forces, their support to terrorist groups in the northwest of Syria, their audacious interference in the internal affairs of Syria. The grave concern we should all be expressing should be over the continued and repeated hostile Israeli attacks against Syrian sovereignty, the casualties and harm they leave in their wake, the direct threat they constitute to the peace and stability of the region. Ladies and gentlemen, do their statement contain any expression of concern over such practices that violate the Charter of the United Nations and relevant Security Council resolutions? Of course not. Madam President, the phrase "stop the violence" is another one that makes regular appearances in their statements. Although they incite to violence every day through pressure, intimidation, and manipulation of societal values, they fuel violence through their hostile practices, through recycling terrorist operatives and foreign thugs that they brought with them from all over the world, and now they refuse to take them back and their families to the countries of origin, to their countries of origin, to prosecute them. Over the past 11 years, they've shed tears over the suffering of the Syrian people, but they're denying that this suffering is a result of their failed policies, their aggressive actions, their inflammatory statements, and their hypocrisy. The humanitarian suffering of the Syrian people started when those countries undermined the peace and stability enjoyed by Syrian citizens, when they used criminal and terrorist operatives to wreak havoc and to spread fear and terror, to destroy vital infrastructure and development gains, when they imposed unilateral coercive measures, and they're now repeatedly threatening to impose more of those measures. Those aggressive policies are the reason for the migration waves and refugee waves. They prevent Syria from creating the necessary conditions for their safe and dignified return to their homes. This would put an end to their suffering. The Turkish regime is striking deals to obstruct Syrian efforts. Today, these countries are obstructing all local, regional, and international efforts to rebuild what their dirty war has destroyed, to start early recovery projects that would allow Syrians to be more resilient, that would help them stay in their country rather than migrating or seeking refuge, that would encourage those who left to come back. Madam President, those countries are calling for a political solution in Syria, but this is hypocrisy and political bidding. Those countries are pushing for their idea of a political solution, one that does not respect the will of the Syrian people and its national choices, one that would perpetuate the Syrian crisis and would obstruct reaching a genuine solution. They're interfering in what is under the exclusive purview of the Syrian people. They're imposing military and political frameworks that are inconsistent with the history, societal and cultural values of the Syrian people and the challenges that it is facing. And when they do speak of accountability and impunity, they do not by any means mean accountability for their crimes, their aggression, their violations, their support to terrorism, their sponsoring terrorism. Justice, in the perspective of those countries, is a selective concept to be achieved by politicized, inadequate mechanisms imposed through pressure to serve their own interests and agenda, or through manipulating the fundamentals of international law, resorting to distorted interpretations and other immoral concepts. To those we say, shedding the blood of the Syrian people, destroying their achievements, stealing their resources, those are crimes for which you must be held accountable. They will not go unpunished. Madam President, my delegation had to give a comprehensive overview of what has transpired in Syria over the past 11 years. At the same time, we are committed to make all efforts to improve the humanitarian situation, to provide the basic health and education services, to improve the living conditions for Syrians. We are committed to working with the United Nations and international partners, including through enhancing the delivery of humanitarian aid from within Syrian territories and implementing early recovery projects and creating the conducive conditions for a dignified and voluntary return of the displaced to their homes. Madam President, the Syrian Arab Republic is committed to a political solution that is based on an inter-Syrian national dialogue, a political process that is Syrian-led and Syrian-owned, without any foreign interference, which would fulfill the aspirations of the Syrian people, a process that would fully respect the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Syria. the Syrian government has made commendable efforts to achieve reconciliation and peace, including through local reconciliations in a number of cities and areas in Syria. In implementation of the amnesty decrees issued by the President of the Republic, they allowed thousands of Syrians in Syria and outside, allowed them to return to their normal life. My delegation welcomes the 7th session of the Constitutional Committee. We commend the positive, constructive engagement of the Syrian delegation and its commitment to fulfill the aspirations of the Syrian people. We reject any foreign interferences in the work of the committee, any attempts to obstruct its work. We reject the imposition of predetermined outcomes or artificial timelines. In closing, restoring peace, security, and stability in the Syrian Arab Republic will only be achieved if these Western countries abandon their hostile policies against my country, if they stop sponsoring terrorism, if they take back their nationals, foreign terrorist fighters and their families, if they end occupation and illegal foreign presence on Syrian territories, if they lift the stifling, immoral economic blockade, and if they promote the efforts of the Syrian people in development and reconstruction. Thank you, Madam President. I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for his statement.